Never letting get near you, but still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down, cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color of fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, I am a political junkie. I am. I love politics. I love having a conversation about politics. Let me tell you a little dirty secret about myself. When I was younger, instead of watching cartoons, I used to watch a lot of C-SPAN. Yes. While kids would watch cartoons like Spider-Man and this and that, I was the nerdy kid that watched C-SPAN because I was always intrigued of how government work. And so today, I want to talk about something that's kind of a red flag to me right now. And it's like you see it everywhere. Project 25. Recently, the Supreme Court as well gave unlimited unlimited immunity to future presidents. Even though Biden is president now, if he wanted to kind of take advantage of it, he could if he wanted to. And so we're going to just get into it a little bit. I have a special guest with me. I have Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali with me. This man is amazing. He's been on the show. This is going to be the third time he's been on the show, but he's just amazing. Just a thought leader, strategist, policymaker, and an activist committed to environment, justice, public health. He's been just everywhere. You've seen him on different talk shows, and also he spent his career with the EPA. And so what's going on is dear to his heart because he knows a lot of people that's in the field and that's going to be impacted if Project 25 gets implemented. And he's here with me today. Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, thank you for coming on.
Oh, brother, thank you. It's always an honor and a privilege to be able to hold space with you.
No, thank you. And the last thing I want to say, he's an extraordinary poet too. Like the stuff he's been posting on X, no longer Twitter, when it comes to poetry, is phenomenal.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's just my mother, my grandmother, and the ancestors speaking. So, I don't want to take credit for what they share with me. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
And what they're sharing with you is a beautiful thing. But my next question, because I ask all my guests that comes on the show, because I'm all about mental health. Being an activist, you've been on shows, warning people what's going on. Yeah. How's your heart?
It is strong, but it is also concerned because we continue to lose rights, especially for our people, which is so critically important because we've worked so hard, not just ourselves in this moment, but our grandparents and our great grandparents and, and continuing to go back, everything that they poured into, trying to make positive change happen. So, my heart is strong, but at the same time, I'm really concerned about our generation and future generations. So, I continue to pray, I continue to meditate, I continue to write to strengthen my resolve and to make sure that not only myself, but others who are interested in being a part of positive change can see a North Star. So I'm strong, as we have to be, but at the same time, I got to continually try and find ways of recharging.
Definitely. And how do you recharge?
Well, my poetry. That's my therapy. You get a chance to tackle some really tough things and hopefully do it in a respectful way, but in a way that is raw, in a way that helps people to really understand what's going on. Because, the reality is we live in a country. There's some intentionality in people not being able to read. We see what goes on in Florida and other places where they continually try and take away our opportunities to educate ourselves in an authentic way. But, we also live in a society where people want information quickly. And through writing poetry, it gives you an opportunity to still hit at the core of what's going on, but do it in a way that hopefully creates a visual scenario in people's minds of themselves, and where we can go and what we can do. So, that's where I'm at right now.
And one of your last pieces you wrote on 4th of July, that was a powerful piece, which I'm going to put the link in the description so people can read that piece. When you talk about, it goes back to the Frederick Douglass writing when he says, what is it to a slave when it comes to 4th of July?
Yeah.
And you put it into modern time.
Yeah.
And, before we get into the conversation, but just talk about the inspiration of the piece that you wrote.
Yeah. Well, all the greats, they come to us if we will just be still for a minute and listen. Everyone from Baldwin to those who are with us, Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez. But often we don't think about Frederick Douglass in the same way, even though he was an amazing writer and orator, as many of the others, like Amiri Baraka and others who have been freedom fighters for a long time. I wanted to create a piece that, as you said, brought forward the sets of challenges that existed in the past, but how the reality is still going on today. I didn't want to sugarcoat. We often talk about the 4th of July in a very sugar-coated way, and we focus on barbecues and fireworks and all these other types of things, and forget that when, the 4th of July in 1776 was first around, we were not considered fully human at that time, right? And all the things that were sort of captured and not being seen as a human, and the struggle that we have had. But it is also not just about the historical aspect, because folks will often say, well, that happened hundreds of years ago. How does that play out today in my life? So I'm always trying to bridge our history, which is always trying to be erased, and honoring that, but also bringing it forward in this moment, whether it is in triumph or tragedy, of what's actually happening. So my inspiration was honoring the words of Frederick Douglass, but putting it in the context of the 21st century.
And you definitely did that with that piece. If you haven't read it, I recommend you reading it. I recommend you reading it to your kids. If you're a grandparent, I recommend you read it to your grandchildren, because I think it puts things in perspective in our modern time and the days that we're living in. All right. And I know you got a lot to say, so let's get into the main topic. What I want to do with this conversation, I want to draw the link between Project 27 as well as the Supreme Court decision giving immunity to future presidents under the umbrella of unitary executive theory. And what this theory is something that people pulled out of their ass under the Second Amendment to justify more power to the executive branch. So before we get into that, let people know, what is Project 25?
Well, Project 2025 is about the actual restructuring of the government and moving power away from all of us into the hands of a few, and then making decision. It is really, let's be real. I love coming on your show because you ain't got to try and walk around it or that type of thing. It is a white nationalist manifesto for the United States. It is literally about taking not only away your rights, but if you really get into it, resources as well, impacting your vote. And no matter which group you come from, they focused on you and they're saying, you know what, we don't see any value in you. And so we're going to make sure that we marginalize you. We're going to put you in this box. And if you don't like it, too bad, because we are going to restructure the government in all kinds of ways. So let's go big picture, right? In the macro, what they're saying is that we will remove many of the federal employees that are out there, and we will replace those with political appointees. Doesn't matter if they have any experience in environmental protection or housing or transportation or job creation or health, any of these things, as long as they're loyal to the person that they assume is going to be president, which of course is Trump, then you're good. Now, folks will say, well, Mustafa, why does that? I mean, you know what? I know a couple of people who are government employees, but what's the big deal?
Right.
Well, when we look at who's actually employed in federal service, we know that there are many of our people have actually been able to move into the middle class, sometimes into the upper middle class because of hard work over 10, 20, 30, 40 years of dedication. So again, when we look at wealth gaps inside of our community, we know that those folks have been able to get those good government jobs, as our grandparents parents used to talk about. They have played a role in helping us to be able to move forward. They also, when they get into this position, they will also be able to work on the contracting and subcontracting opportunities and make sure that Black folks and brown folks and other folks won't have the same sets of opportunities to be able to get into that. So it's not only about people just having a job, but it is also about the wealth that we are all trying diligently to be able to build and pass down to our kids. They're also talking about getting rid of federal agencies. Now,
yes, please talk about that, because I think that's important that you brought that up. When you talk about federal agency, I think of what the Supreme Court just recently did with the Chevron?
Yep.
Limited the power of federal agency when it comes to lawmaking, because a judge doesn't know anything about certain things, whether it comes to EPA, FDA. Now you're putting the pressure on the courts to decide what laws. So yeah, just go more into that. I think that's important.
No, and I appreciate you bringing to our conversation, because there's a trifecta at a minimum that's going on. So you've got Project 2025, right, which is a proposed set of actions that I'm talking about. So getting rid of the Department of Education. Well, we know if you get rid of the Department of Education, then you're going to impact public education on the local level, because you no longer have that national body that's actually, watching to make sure that people are not doing funky stuff. Right. So we got to make sure that the Department of Education is there, because they would love to privatize education. Yes. Many of us won't be able to afford private education. And so we need to make sure that we are helping to keep public education strong. Many of our parents and grandparents and others, that was a part of the work of the civil rights, to make sure, one, that there was access, but to make sure that the resources were going there, because there have been former Supreme Court cases of a separate versus equal, right? But we know it was never equal in our communities. And then over the years, we've slowly been able to make some progress. We still got a long way to go, but you need a Department of Education. You need a Department of Education also because these folks, they are nefarious with what they're trying to do. So they're also trying to get rid of student loans and Pell Grants. And we know that in our communities, for those of us who have been blessed to be able to actually go to college, in many instances, our folks couldn't just write a check. Yeah. So we needed to be able to have other financial sets of opportunities to be able to get in there. They're also trying to make sure that they continue to close the door. There's been these other Supreme Court cases recently, but this Project 2025 just kind of solidifies everything together. So you got that. They're also trying to get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency or weaken it. And we know that when it comes to our communities, we're the ones that continue to be in the sacrifice zones. We're the ones that continue to have all the poison coming from the pollution. And then that's the reason we get many of the cancers that we got, the liver and kidney diseases, the asthma, a number of different things that are part of that. So by them either weakening or getting rid of the Environmental Protection Agency, once again, there are impacts that are happening on our bodies. The Department of Justice. Now, some folks traditionally, we always, kind of raised our eyebrow when it came to the Department of Justice, because we remember back in the day with J. Edgar Hoover and all these other folks that was doing all this stuff to our organizations. But, under this current administration, the Department of Justice has actually been putting their foot in a whole bunch of people's behinds. These rogue police, not unions, but many of these places around the country where you've had these bad things that have been going on in relationship to police and police agencies, so forth and so on. Right. But in other cases as well, they've also been taking a look at, what's been going on around funding in relationship to home ownership and a number of other things. So having a strong focus on civil rights, Department of Justice is critically important. So they're trying to make sure that they weaken that as well. You can go through all these federal agencies and departments that they are either trying to get rid of or weaken. And that is a part of Project 2025. The other part of it is around immigration. They're trying to do some real nefarious things and stopping people from coming into the country. I know different folks have different views on that, but the reality of the situation, when we get past the rhetoric, is that we've got to have one or two things happening. One, we got to have more babies. right? Because you got to have more people moving into the workforce as older people are retiring, or you got to have more immigrants. And we know traditionally, we've always had a whole bunch of different folks. Of course, our folks and some indigenous folks are the ones who are not immigrants, because we were in many instances brought here. But of course, there's other theories also that some brothers and sisters were already here. So, but whatever the case may be, we know that immigration is another big one. They got this thing about the LGBTQ community. So no matter who it is, they are trying to actually roll back the clock. They're trying to go back to the 50s. Some people would say even before then, in how America looks, who has power, and who actually is the one who will benefit from the resources that are out there. So in a quick snapshot, that's Project 2025.
Yeah, and what I think what's scary is that, like, when you talk about Project 25, I say to people that this is basically the same thing that they gave Ronald Reagan in his first term, but on steroids.
Yes, and let me put it in an additional context. So it is that, it is definitely on steroids. It's hyper, but I would also ask people, and I know folks are busy, right? Folks working, when they got some free time, they just want to be able to chill out for a second, go have a barbecue, get a drink. I would ask folks to also look at the dynamics that people put in place in South Africa during apartheidism, because apartheidism also had a plan that ended up being implemented on how they were able to control the majority of people through their sets of actions that were put there.
Right.
Now, also, Project 2025 comes out of a fear. The fear is that by the time we get to around 2045, which is just around the corner, that we know that our country will no longer be a white majority country. So many of these folks who have put this plan together over the last number of years understood the dynamics, that there would be a moment in history, in the not so distant history, when they would no longer be the dominant culture, if you want to say it that way. Definitely not the dominant in relationship to numbers of how many white folks going to be in this country and how many black and brown and indigenous and other folks going to be in this country. So this is, when I talk about a power grab and a restructuring of the government, in many instances, this is because of understanding the new sets of dynamics, and that there would be power in the hands of black folks and brown folks for the first time ever in any significant way in this country.
No, and I agree with that too, because you see elements. I won't say elements, but you see this full push for fascism in this country. Just by the rhetoric, and if you like go through Project 25, or even if you skim through Trump Agenda 47, like if you skim through it, it's hand to hand together. Even though Trump like he's never heard of it, he wish him good luck. Dude, you are the face of the Republican Party. And you not knowing this exists,
right?
Come on, it's the obvious. You're just trying to have your cake and eat it too. And so, if he does come get elected, I know he doesn't read. Like I say, he doesn't read. And so, but he'll have people in position that's going to take that playbook and implement it. Because, if you talk about like the things he said, he talked about being a dictator. And Project 2025 is like right there, kind of leads him into that path, even though if he say he's talking out his ass, but if the reality, if you think about it, it put things in place to put him in that safe haven.
I'm not one for calling folks a liar unless I know they're lying.
Right.
We know that when Donald Trump was in office the last time, there was a set of fact checkers. He lied over 30,000 times in 4 years, about 21 times a day. Sometimes he lied when he didn't even have to lie. He just decided that's what he was going to do.
Right.
So, if that's the path you want to go down, then you're going to get checked on the stuff that you're saying. When he says that he knows nothing about Project 2025, that's a curious matter, considering that many of the people who used to work for him and consult with him are the ones that actually put it together. Now, we can't put everything on Trump because there are individuals behind the scenes who are actually pulling the puppet strings, if I can say it that way, and have had a long-term plan of being able to retake power. So when he says that, most folks know that he's not telling the truth. And for those who don't, it's because they don't want to know. So, as my grandfather would say, that dog not gonna hunt. If I could take it country real quick for folks. The other part of it is that, when you look at Project 2025, I think about the things that are happening right here in this moment and how it will get worse. So another part of their big thing is making sure there's no funding going to climate change, that we remove ourselves from all the work that's there. And I'm like, how does that make any damn sense? Right now, we know that people are living with 100+ degree temperatures, and we know those are going to continue to get worse unless we get focused on what's going on. And we know that once again, it is our communities who are the ones who, once again, get hit first and worst. And we know that we die at twice the rate of white folks from extreme heat, as an example. So whether it's hurricanes or heat or droughts, all these different types of things, we already know our bills are high. So that means if you got these high temperatures, then you either got to make a choice if you're going to pay your electricity. And if you do, the bills are going to go, or you're going to use it, your air conditioning, then that's going to go up. So we can go down the line also, because we have these diseases in our communities. When we deal with these extreme heat, sometimes the medicine doesn't work the same. Yeah. And sometimes people don't know that. And then the other part of Project 2025 that a lot of people are paying attention to is around abortion rights. Yeah. And I know in our communities, we often also just want to make sure that, that our women are protected and that, children are coming into our community. But you also got to peel back the layer around some of this stuff, right? So we know that in this country, people have always wanted to control Black bodies, right? We should be able to make the choice. A sister should be able to make the choice if she wants to bring forward a life into this world. And then if that's the case, we should actually have programs that are there to support that instead of making it more difficult. So everything that Project 2025 does makes our lives more difficult, puts our lives in danger, shortens our lives. And that's one of the reasons that we should be paying attention to it. Then you overlay, right, the Supreme Court cases. Yes. So people sometimes, I often sit back and wonder, do people actually understand the game that is being played? Because Trump put many of these individuals on the Supreme Court, not all of them, because he knew how they would adjudicate a case, right? Or how they would end up coming down on a particular case. Right. So people have known for a while that these things were going to come. So when you look at the Chevron case that you mentioned, that is 40 years of settled law. Yeah. The Supreme Court justices literally had to reach deep, deep down into the court system to pull it up to the highest court. There was no reason for them to bring that up at this time. And what it did, once again, was said, as you shared so very concisely, it says that the federal government, so you've got a couple of different things. I worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years. I worked for John Conyers when he was chair of the Judiciary Committee. So I got to see, how do we create laws, right? So even when you're going Capitol Hill and these laws are being put in place, the congresspersons also know that they don't have all the answers. And that's why they want the expertise of individuals who work in federal agencies to say, where's the blind spots here? Where are the gaps? How's this going to play out on the ground? And then that's when a rule is created to be able to make sure that the intention of the individuals on Capitol Hill when they created that law can actually be placed into reality in a way that helps to protect people's lives or to make their community stronger, or a number of other things, or it could be things around, the economy. So when you have the Chevron case, now, as you mentioned, that expertise is no longer honored, and judges, who many of them, of course, are not scientists, right? They're not biologists or a number of the other things that are in the science field. Now they're the ones that are going to make the final decision. And we've seen that the courts, when it comes to things in our community, have not been siding in a way that we end up being better off. So it's just scary for Black folks, some of the things that are going on there. And then you also tie in the immunity case, right? That you mentioned also. So that now says that if you are a president of the United States and you are in your official duties, nothing you do can be nothing that you do can be prosecuted because you are doing it under your official duties. Now that means, as you've heard other people probably talk about, you could have an agency go out and shoot somebody, and because it was an official act, and that's an extreme example, that you couldn't prosecute in relationship to that. But there are all these other things that are probably much more a reality that a president could do. Like they could incite a riot and have them run up on Capitol Hill and kick in the doors, do a number of other things, and you couldn't prosecute them if it was a part of official duties, which someone could figure out a way to say that it is. There's a laundry list of things that are a part of that. When you take the Chevron case, when you take the immunity case, and you begin to pull that together, you can see once again how there's a restructuring of who has power and who doesn't, and taking it away from the people. And then you wrap all that up in Project 2025, and you can see how America could look very different very quickly in the not so distant future.
And I agree with that. And the scary thing about it is that you see this rise of fascist ideology in Europe. Like you see it in France. You see it as a close election in France with Le Pen. She's like the woman version of Hitler, to put it, factually. You got what's going on in Britain. You see this going on right now, and in America, you see this slow dynamic of using policy as a way to fight the culture war. And if you poll majority of Americans, they don't even care about the culture war. All they want is just the basic principles in life of making sure their kids have great education, making sure the water they're drinking from the faucet is clean. They just want this, not worrying about their job being moved overseas to another country because it's cheaper for another company. These are the basic things people are doing that they worry about. But what they're doing is creating this. When I think of Noam Chomsky and the manufacture of dissent, so they're manufacturing these things to make people fear, like, oh yeah, if Trump does or whoever doesn't get this is what's going to happen. And it's just frustrating to see. It's like history is repeating itself.
It is, but most folks don't remember what happened last month, right? Besides what happened, historically, a decade or 100 years, a couple 100 years ago. And that's why your show and others are important in planting seeds and helping people to begin to think through this. How will this impact my community? How will this impact my family? Is an important set of conversations, because we know folks love to tell us that everything gonna be all right. We're gonna take care of you, and we know that has rarely happened at all. So we have to be an informed consumer, and then we have to figure out with our vote who we want to vote for. Now, you've known me for a little while. I never tell anybody who to vote for, but I do say you should vote for somebody who cares about your community and somebody who's actually going to make your life better. So for me, it is not about sitting out. There's a whole bunch of different types of folks, both on the local, the county, the state, and the federal level, for you to give some consideration to and then make the best decision. Because if we don't get engaged, we know somebody else will, and they probably ain't going to care about what's going on in our community. And they're definitely not going to try and move resources to our folks if we're not in the fight. So, we just got to understand all these different dynamics that are going on, and that there's real intentionality in taking power away from our communities.
Definitely, definitely. And I think going back to the Supreme Court is, them not separating the difference between unofficial and official.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I think about it now, it's like what Richard Nixon did in Watergate. If he labeled that unofficial, that would have protected him under this new Congress, under this new Supreme Court.
Well, if it was official, it would have.
Well, if it was official, that's what I'm saying. If it was official, he would be protected under this ruling by the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So they kicked back down to the lower court, the unofficial aspect, and they've got to figure that out. But that could take quite a while. And then by that time, the election probably will have happened. And if you have Trump who's come in, he'll just shut everything down. So you'll never have that. But it is important, both official and unofficial duties, and how we take a look at that and what comes out of it. But again, the other thing I want to share with your audience is that when you look at some of these Supreme Court cases, they didn't just happen, right? You literally have very wealthy individuals who have been supporting, these actions to bring these cases up because they want to maximize profits.
Yeah.
They want to maximize profits, even if it impacts people's health. So we should be very clear about that. And then with Project 2025, you have billionaires and some of these very right-wing organizations that have been a part of the creation of this, not just last year, but this has been going on for quite a while now, and looking for the right moment to be able to move these types of things forward. So with all the things we got going on in our lives, we've got to also pay attention to this, and then figure out how we want to get engaged.
Definitely, I agree with that. I think the most important thing about this conversation is try to get as much information you can before you make your choice. Again, we're not trying to sway you to vote a certain way, but it's important you make a logical decision based on the information you get. But unfortunately, what we live in, where we're getting so disseminated with information, where you don't know what's false, what's facts, and not true.
Right.
But it's important that we, do our due diligence to get as much of the best information as possible to make a wise choice, because the decisions that the Supreme Court makes is going to impact not now, but 20 and 30 years later. So this is going to impact your grandchildren. So I want to pose a question to you. Do you think there should be term limits to Supreme Court?
Oh, without a doubt. I always have, but this has just reinforced that. You can't have someone who's a judge for life, right? Things change. So, we should definitely have term limits. We have term limits for other things that are a part of our federal process. If we don't, you get people who just go off and do everything. Look at Clarence Thomas, right? Mm-hmm. A man who's now worth, I forget what the last number I saw, $28 million, but yet only makes a federal salary, and has been taking all kinds of ethical violations and taking gifts from all these folks and then proceeding on a case. And by no means, he's not the only one, right? So I don't want to just make it sound like it's him. But, because he at least looks like us, even though he may not be us, we have to make sure that we're also, putting spotlight on that. So we got to have term limits. It just makes sense. And I think we would have a better judiciary, right? We have to vote, and vote people in. Many of these judges on lower levels, if we see them not doing the right thing, then we get rid of them, right?
Right.
But on the Supreme Court, we've allowed these justices to be there for life. So term limits, I think, would be incredibly important.
No, and I definitely agree with that, because it kind of ruffles feathers, and then it also, for example, it gives opportunity to change things, because what works, I won't say what works, but what the Supreme Court right now did today could change in a couple of years because they don't have, you know, that protection of being on the court for a lifetime. And what I worry about that being that they're for a lifetime is like you were saying, that they have a tendency of being bribed and taking money, and instead of doing the will of the people, they do the will of the people that put money in their pocket. Prime examples, I know there was a court case that their Supreme Court refused, they didn't see, that Clarence Thomas wasn't too happy about. It was a court case against OSHA.
Yeah. Well, they pick and choose which cases that they want to, bring into the mix, if you will. So there's a lot of, we have to figure out a way to make sure that there's real ethics in relationship to the folks who sit on the highest court of the land, right? Yes. And there needs to also be real transparency about the cases that are being brought forward. We often see what happens on the back end after they make a decision. We got to make sure that we also have helping people to have an understanding of the cases that are coming forward, why they're being chosen, and what the ramifications of them could be. So we have a lot of work to do in relationship to the Supreme Court. When many of these things were being created, people assumed that folks would come forward with their better angels, if I can say it that way, that they would come forward in a very ethical way, that they would have the best interests of the country at hand. And now what we're finding is that whether it's the presidency or the Supreme Court, that's not the case. That, we're seeing folks' dark side, if you will, or they're demons. So we've just got to take another look at these institutions that we put so much trust in, and make sure that they are actually not only meeting the moment, but there's real equity and justice also a part of the equation.
No, and I totally agree with that. And I think to wrap it up in a nice little bow, I think what's going on right now, especially with the Supreme Court giving immunity to future presidents, is I look at that as, if you're people that's out there that's into like the Marvel movies, I would say this decision by the Supreme Court is basically relatable to giving Thanos the Infinity Stones.
I was going to say that. I mean, it's really real. You could have a president that came in and said, I want to create martial law. I'm going to do martial law and name your city, because I don't like that they didn't vote for me. So Atlanta, or DC or Philadelphia, whatever it is, you could. I'm not saying that it would happen, but they could have that much power. Now, hopefully you would have, like you did in this last administration, before the Biden administration came in, you had some generals and others that when Trump was trying to do some crazy stuff, there's like, nah, partner, you got to hold up for a second, because that's not how we get down. But you're not always going to have that. I mean, that's why part of Project 2025 is him being able to bring into the federal government individuals who are loyal to him, not to the Constitution, not to the country, but him. So, that gets, that's some shady stuff, but it's also something we got to really, as we make a decision about who we want to get down with, understand that you've got these dynamics that are going on. Last time, Trump was in, he wasn't about to put any black judges down. Of course, if they were black judges, I think there were 2 or 3 out of a huge amount. They're not going to necessarily come from our mindset of making sure that they're being equitable with our community. But he could just come in and say, you know what, this is what it's going to look like. These are the individuals, and that's the end of it right there. So when you talk about Thanos, the question becomes, how you gonna cut that head off, right? And for me, we cut the head off by getting engaged in the political process, and making good choices, our choices, right? Of what you want for your community and whom are the individuals that you want to see helping to help our community be able to move forward. So we have decisions to make. My grandmother says you have power unless you give it away. We've got to utilize our power to make sure that we are holding people accountable, that we're moving resources back into our communities, and that we let folks know that if we give you a shot and you don't do the right thing, we'll find somebody else. But we got to stay engaged.
Definitely. I think that's the most important thing, is about being engaged, being aware of your environment, going out there and just getting family members involved into the process. Because I think that's the one thing is a lot of people lose faith in the process because they say, hey, I voted once and nothing's changed. But the problem is that you have to be engaged constantly. Like, things is not going to move at the speed of light. Unfortunately, that's the real world we look at. When you get into the civil rights movement, like, when you think about the bill that passed in 1965, like, that took basically three generations for that to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of how change work.
That's real talk. I mean, there are individuals that are playing the long game, right? The long game was around Project 2025. The long game was around finding the opportunities to rescind these Supreme Court cases. So we've got to understand that, and I don't like that analogy of playing checkers and chess. People done heard that alone, many, many times. It's true, but we just got to understand that there are folks who are willing to step by step put processes in place, decade after decade after decade, to take power away from us, to make sure that they are the decision makers moving forward, not for a year, not for a presidency of 4 years. These folks are literally looking, not only just the restructuring of the government, but making sure that your voice has, it's silenced, that you have no ability to protect yourself in this country, right? And when I say protect yourself, I mean protect yourself, not just physically, but also economically. So we've got to understand that they have a significant, well thought out, well resourced set of actions. And we've got to understand that, yes, our vote matters each time, both in the general and the midterm, but that we've got to continually keep moving up this mountaintop that Dr. King talked about, and other folks have framed in other types of ways, if we truly want our folks to be free. And I want to see Black folks be free. I want to be free economically, as well as physically, as well as spiritually and mentally. And that means that we have to make the sets of investments, our generation, to make that become a reality.
And I totally agree with that. And that's one of the biggest, I think, letdowns when you talk about our community or even the Democrats, is that, when it comes to think tank groups, and the conservative, they think about the long game. This is 40 years in the making. Like, if you go to the website, like, they have things in place where they're looking for the best and the brightest to sit on a court, because they realize that they are the minority, and so how can we keep the majority? And the one way to do that is to get the best, the brightest, and keep that status quo the norm.
Without a doubt. I mean, we have so many brilliant people in our community that often, they just don't get a chance to share their voice, and they don't get a chance to come together with other brilliant people and to build, which is incredibly important. And we just got to make sure that we're creating those additional types of opportunities. We got to make sure that we have our own plan for our community, right? I often ask folks, so what is the Black agenda? And there's actually a silence lots of times, right? We might be able to say one thing or two things, but we need to actually be critically thinking. And I know there are some groups out there that have done this, not just about one issue. Sometimes we'll just get focused on one issue, which is important, and not think about the totality of the sets of opportunities that are there, and how do we coalesce around them, and then how do we actually make sure that we are pushing, not just in a moment, but with a real movement to be able to make it become a reality. And sometimes we just have not yet been able to do that in a significant way to see the change that people really want. And you'll hear people say, well, I haven't seen enough change. And I'm like, well, I think it just depends on how we are framing what change looks like and how much we are willing to pour into that. Because folks will always talk about what they don't like.
Right.
People will tell you in a heartbeat, I don't like this, I don't like that.
Right.
And my question always is, well, what do you like?
Right.
And then it's usually much smaller. And then my next question is, what have you been doing to be able to achieve the things that you said that you didn't appreciate, or that were hurtful or not helpful to our community? And I'm always amazed at how much silence is in that space. Now, there are some, of course, who are out there and they banging it out, but we need a whole lot of soldiers to be able to make it become a reality.
Facts. Dr. Ali, thank you for coming on. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you want to do it, you can do it. Did you want to recite a piece, or you just want people to go to the Twitter? The X to read the piece.
Well, which one you want?
Whatever you like. If you want to do the 4th of July piece, it's up to you. It's your call.
You know what? I could do that too. I write a whole bunch of them, but let me hit folks with that real quick.
All right. And quick question: when is the book coming out? The poetry book?
Hopefully we'll be out in the next couple of months. We got that going on, and then I just got contacted to do a book on 2025, Project 2025 as well. So, man, I got a lot going on. I'm blessed and I'm thankful, but we're going to try and do what we can to make sure that our folks have the information they need to make the best choices for themselves. So what the name of this is, what to the descendants of the formerly enslaved is the 4th of July? Is it a flag, red, white, and blues that bleed into skin, ancient sins sewn tight like keloids on a nation's memory? Is the fireworks crack and an echo of whips and a phantasmagoria of liberty, whispered lies through plumes of smoke, chokeholds unseen? Tell me, what is the freedom to us, the descendants of shackled bones, broken homes, dreams stifled by concrete jungles and barbed wire skies? Is it a celebration of a mockery, a dichotomy, where the emancipation is just a word, a ghost haunting history's pageantry? What is it to us but another day of survival, of ritualistic silence to the beat of systemic drums, a march not forward but in circles, of strides erased by redlining and white flight, schools that crumble, futures that fumble under the weight of invisible chains heavy with disdain? We see your independence, a grand illusion of festivity built on selective amnesia, where our ancestors' cries are buried under your anthems, crescendos of pain, a footnote in your tales of triumph and bravery. Yet here we stand, eyes wide open, hearts broken by the lie that freedom is equally bestowed. What to us is the day but a paradox, a pyrotechnic display of equality denied, where liberty's lights flicker in ghettos, and the pursuit of happiness is a chosen against bullets and biases, statistics that speak of Black lives truncated, dreams vacated. Your fireworks are gunshots in our streets, a symphony of sorrow, an elegy of lost names, children who never got to dream beyond the color of their skin, men and women pinned under knees, bodies turned hashtags, memories faded into the ether of outrage. What is the 4th but a reminder of promises unkept, of rights withheld, of a nation still grappling with its original sin? A day where the land of the free is a mirage, where stars and stripes obscure the scars of generational trauma, wounds unhealed. To us, it is a day of paradoxes, of celebrating a freedom where we are still fighting for, of honoring ancestors whose chains still clink in the subtext of everyday lives, of wrestling with a history that tries to erase our resilience, our brilliance, our existence. We stand not in reverence, but in defiance, knowing that our freedom is yet to be fully won, that in the fourth is not our independence, but a call to remember, to resist, to rise. For what is it to us but a call to action? A reminder that until every Black soul is free to breathe, to dream, to be, the fourth is just a shadow, a specter, a lie dressed in the guise of liberty.
Wow, that's powerful, man. Powerful. Thank you for sharing that. What that reminded me was when Paul Robeson was at the, what was it, the House Committee
Mm-hmm.
on Un-American, and the one thing that stuck out to me when he said, "I'm not free." Like one of the representatives say, "Hey, you went to these elite colleges, you played football, you're this actor," and he said, "I'm not free until all my people are free."
That's right. That's right.
Bro,
Yes.
that was powerful. Thank you for sharing. How can people find you, man?
I mean, you can get me at MustafaSantiagoAli.com. You can get me on, I still call it Twitter. Do what you want, Elon, at EJ in Action. You can get me on IG at Mustafa Santiago Ali.
All right, follow him. And my last question: when you gonna go on stage to recite these pieces?
Yeah, man, I'm always out there. You know what? I was so blessed. Let me give a shout out to Tavis Smiley. So
Okay.
I did this event in California, and it was the first time that in that type of a forum that someone was able to read one of their pieces, and I closed out his event that he did. Brother Cornell West was there. A number of other folks were there. So I've just been so incredibly blessed over the last year that folks have embraced the work and have uplifted it. So I just really appreciate all of our family for just being there and continuing to encourage me to move forward.
And I hope you keep on moving forward because you have a gift, and I'm truly honored that I can call you uncle. That means the world to me because I've been the biggest fan of you since I first saw you on Orlando Martin show, and and just following your career, and to be able to just call you that name means everything to me. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate the fight, and keep fighting the good fight, because we need more people like you to just let people know what's going on, and how they can be a part of not the problem but the solution.
No doubt, no doubt. As my grandmother and my father has always taught me, power to the people.
Power to the people. And this has been another amazing episode of the podcast. Like, subscribe, and make sure you follow him on X and everything he's doing, because all that links will be in the description below. And we're out of here. Peace. All right. All right. Stay on. All right. Cool. And